step in squaring the board is using the planer. So the planer is very similar to the jointer, where we're basically just flattening one face of the board. We change the thickness of our board to the final thickness. So if I need a part that's, let's say 3/4 of an inch thick, this machine is what's going to change it to that 3/4 inch thickness. Alright, basically what it does is it makes both faces parallel to each other, so they're both faces are nice and flat and parallel to one another. So how it works is it's very similar to the jointer. Alright, a little complicated here to kind of see in this diagram, but if we feed the board in through the front of the planer, there's rollers that basically suck the board into the planer, and in this case the cutter head is on top of the board. So the jointer, if you remember, was underneath the table. This time the cutter head is on top. It's going to be spinning. As it passes through, you'll notice the height difference. It's basically removing the top layer of material as it passes through, therefore changing the thickness of the board when it comes out. Okay, so it starts as a thicker board. We do thin passes, light passes. As it goes through, it removes the material, becomes thinner. Alright, we continue to plane it until this becomes the thickness that we need for whatever part we're making. Alright, so one thing to note is the jointed face from the previous step, step number 2, that face goes down against the jointer, against the table of the planer. The cutter head then flattens the top of the board. The parts of the machine, just the main things you need to know is we have that off switch. Just like the jointer, you have to reset it by twisting it to the right. That then allows you to turn on 2 different on buttons. Okay, the one on button to the right turns on the actual intake rollers. That's what sucks your board through. The second on switch turns on the cutter head up here, which is actually hidden from you, but that's what turns on the actual cutter head that does the cutting. You always turn on the right switch first, and then the second one to the left. So this first turns on the roller, this second turns on the cutter head. Here we have a wheel. In the video here shortly, you're going to see me turning that handle to raise this table up. All right, we then have the infeed table that we put the board in through this way, it runs through the planer, comes out the other side. Alright, but the hardest thing to know is the thickness table. Basically, we're moving this to change the thickness of the board as it runs through. Alright, but you'll see here in a second. So, just to give you a quick intro, the first thing I do when I come to the planer is I basically lower this table until this board fits through. I then turn it one turn up the other direction. So you'll see me do that here. So I'm lowering the table here, going counterclockwise. And then I got to a point where it went through, kind of hard to see on this video, then I turned it one turn the other way. So let me show you that again here. Back up a little more. So lowered it. Okay, I could then see that the board goes through without touching. You're then going to see me go clockwise here. Go clockwise 2 turns. That then brings the board up just so it's barely going to touch the top of the board. Okay, that's probably the hardest part to grasp what we're doing there. But the idea is that we only want to remove a little bit of material from the board. So I drop it low enough so it's not touching, then one turn up the other direction to basically just trim the very top of the board. I then reset the switch, press the right on switch, then the second one. Reset, right, left. Okay, when I position my hands, one hand goes on top, the other hand behind. You never want any hands underneath this board, okay, because it's going to slam down and pinch your fingers if it is. So hands on top, one behind, nothing in between the board and the planer. Alright, so I set it. This is my first pass. It's going to feed through. You'll see the planer takes it. You really didn't hear anything cut there. That's normal for the first pass. Okay, that's a good sign. Okay, it fed through. It did not remove a lot of material. That's good for the starting point. Okay, I then get it out. Each time through, I'm going to raise up the wheel clockwise, 1 full revolution. That just basically moved that up a 32nd of an inch. Actually, a 16th of an inch rather. Feed it through again. Now you saw some chips starting to fly. So that top of the board has now been surfaced. I then flip over the board like you saw there. Raise up the turn. 1 full turn, a 1/16 of an inch. Okay, so that's the sequence. Every time through now, I'm going to raise this up 1 full revolution. I'm also going to flip the board over so that both sides get flattened. Okay, you would continue to do that until the board, let me see here, until the board becomes the thickness that you need. Alright, so I'd be checking with a square to make sure it's at the thickness that I need. Alright, so the planer safety, some things that you saw me mention in the video. Raw lumber only, okay, no plywood goes through there. Your piece, like other machines so far, have to be at least 12 inches or 1 foot. That little line means foot, so 1 foot long or 12 inches long. Do not plane boards that are warped or twisted. That's why we use the jointer to flatten one face before the step. Okay, it will not feed through very nicely if it's not flat. The planer must be set to the current thickness of your board. That's what I was trying to explain earlier in the video. Minus 1 full turn. So you saw me lower the table until nothing's touching. We then turn it 1 turn up the other direction just so it cuts off the very top of the board. We don't raise it by more than 1 turn each pass. Each turn, I think I misspoke earlier in the video, each revolution or turn of the wheel moves it up a 1/16 of an inch. If it's a half of a turn, it'd be a 32nd. Okay, so half turn, full turn, anywhere in there is fine. Each time through the planer, we then alternate or flip the board so that the opposite face is facing forward. So raise it up a turn, flip your face. Raise it up a turn, flip the face every time through. So basically we're just taking small amounts off of the thickness each time. Eventually we're going to be at the final thickness that we need. We never want to look in the planer while it's running. We never want to have our fingers between the board and the table like I mentioned. And if your board ever gets stuck in the planer, you just want to turn it off and figure out what went wrong. Okay, but always just turn it off and then we can figure it out.